inequality to write. Let's try a couple more of these. I need to go on to the next page to try a couple more of these. So we're going to move to page 58. And so this one says, Jared had $200. He spent more than $80 at the store. There's kind of our clue, more than. Hopefully you're hearing that. More than's a clue. Write an inequality. Here's your directions. Write an inequality to show the amount he had left, which is another clue, what he had left. What he had left. So if you remember, I told you on the last problem to write the variable first. So I'm going to put a star here. Write variable first. Do they tell us a variable to use? No. So you can just think I need to be using x for my variable. So there's a little bit of work here. If you have to look at this problem, they're asking, write inequality to show what he had left. Well, he had 200 to start. So that's like what he had. And if he spends more than 80, what is he left with? So let's just think if he had 200 and spent exactly 80, what would he be left with? So if I start with 200, that's what he had to start with. And if you spend money, then you're losing it. So if you subtract the 80 that he spent, then what would we be left with? We would be left with exactly, what's that, 120 is what he has left. But that's not what they say. They don't say he spends exactly 80. They say he spends more than 80. So if he spends more than 80, wouldn't he be left with less money because he spent more at the store? So if he spends more than 80, like let's say he spends 100, then he's not going to have 120 left. He's actually only going to have 100 left. So he would be left with less than 120. So since you're going to be left with less than 120, you'd have to say x is less than $120 for your inequality. And if you kind of think about that, he had 200. If he spends more than 80, then he's left with less than 120. Because if he spent exactly 80, he would be left with exactly 120. Good, let's try another one. You're going to have these on your homework. There's going to be a lot of clues they give you, and you have to write the inequality. Carolyn makes more than, I mean, hopefully you're hearing these clue words, 6 cakes in 3 hours. That's a ratio, 6 cakes in 3 hours. Can you write an inequality to represent the hourly rate, so that's another ratio term, hourly rate, if you remember what rate means, at which Carolyn makes cakes. So you need to make sure you're writing the story first, and then we've got to figure out what our clues are. So do they give us a variable to use? We're writing an inequality, so we need to write the variable first. So maybe you want to say x for our variable. She makes more than, and then they give you 6 cakes in 3 hours, which is like the ratio. That is not the rate, because if you remember what hourly rate or rate means, it means per one, and hourly rate means per 1 hour. Well, we know the ratio she makes, which is 6 cakes in 3 hours, and it says more than that. So if more than, you use the greater than sign. So if you just write it that Carolyn makes more than, you could say 6 cakes, and I like to write my ratios as fractions, so I'd put it over 3 hours. But we want to know the hourly rate, meaning how many cakes does she make per 1 hour. So before we would always figure out how do we make this so the ratio is cakes per 1 hour. Some people can see it, oh, you just divide by 3, and we'll get the hourly rate. If you remember cross products, 6 times 1, multiply the 2 across we have and divide by the number left, 3. 6 times 1 dividing by 3, you're still going to get 2 cakes an hour. So that's the hourly rate. But you remember we're writing in inequality, so we have to make sure we're using these signs. So you just need to bring the x is greater than this ratio, but say x is greater than this hourly rate. Another way you could say, or x is greater than 2 cakes per hour or per 1 hour. Why do we have to have greater than? Because it says more than. Why did it have to be 2 cakes per hour? Because they asked for hourly rate. So you start with what they gave you, and then we just kind of made our ratio smaller to the rate. Let's do another example. Mr. D puts less than 8 whiteboards on each table. There are 6 tables. Write the inequality to show the total number of whiteboards. So they're going to give you a clue. They're going to give that to you, and then you have to write the inequality. So we're writing the inequality again. Do they tell us what variable to use? No. So if we write the variable first, we know we're using x, I guess. If you want to use x again. What clues do we have? They put less than 8 whiteboards on each table. But how many tables are there? There are 6 tables. They want to know the total number of whiteboards. So there's a little bit of work to do. So if you were just going to say how many whiteboards does he put on the table, on each table, you would just say x is less than 8 whiteboards on each table. But there's not just a table, there's 6 tables. So if you take 8 whiteboards but times 6 tables, let's see how many would that be. That would be 48 total, right? But if we're writing an inequality, remember we have to use our signs. So less than's our clue. So x would be less than 48 whiteboards. Why did we multiply? Because we needed the total. There were 8 whiteboards on each table, but there were 6 tables total. So 8 times 6 is 48. Did we write an inequality? Did we write the variable first? Yes, we did. So the homework that you're doing on this particular paper works on EE7. It is a worksheet. It is the front that's page 104 and a back that is page 105. You will do all problems. Double check in the packet and make sure that's correct. I believe you have to draw some inequalities. Page 104 on the front and on the back. Yep, some of them are asking you to graph the inequality. Some are asking you to write it. So you will do all problems.